Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Zee Monroe woke before dawn, her heart already racing with a secret too big to contain. She rolled over in her plush, navy blue bedding and reached for her phone on the nightstand. The screen glowed, 5:12 a.m. In the dim light, she tapped the notification from Cedar Creek Women's Clinic again, as if convincing herself it was real. 14 weeks. She bit her lip to hold back a smile, so wide it threatened to split her cheeks. She slipped out of bed and padded across the hardwood floor of her Capitol View apartment, each step lighter than the last. In the kitchen, she opened the stainless steel fridge and retrieved a single white envelope stamped with her name in elegant gold script. Inside lay the official ultrasound printouts. Her fingers trembled as she held the photos up to the soft glow of the under-cabinet lighting. There it was, a tiny heartbeat flickering across the screen, evidence of a life she and Addie had dreamed about but never dared to announce. For a moment, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to whisper, "Hello, little Ember." That was the name she'd chosen for the surprise, a nod to Nova Narrative Studios' fiery logo and the spark she hoped would light up their lives. She slipped the photos back into the envelope and stashed it in the top drawer beneath her collection of silk scarves and leather-bound journals. Zee's mind shifted to her evening plans.
tonight,
She would transform their living room into a cradle of celebration. She pictured the soft candlelight dancing off the framed movie posters on the walls, the gentle clink of crystal wine glasses. And the moment Addie's eyes went wide when he saw the cake she'd ordered from Petal and Parchment Bakery. It was called Our Little Star, a delicate vanilla sponge iced with pale yellow buttercream. Tiny gold stars dusted across the top. She'd also picked up a bottle of 2019 Pinot Gris Select, light, crisp, and impossibly romantic. The clock ticked towards 6 p.m., but Zee refused to rush. She spent the morning drafting a storyboard for her team at Nova Narrative, sketching out ideas for a new video series. At midday, she slipped away for a quick lunch at Lone Star Grounds, savoring her usual oat milk latte while her mind replayed the ultrasound images over and over. She felt invincible, as though she were carrying a secret superpower. Back home, by 2:30 p.m., she changed into a simple, yet elegant, emerald green wrap dress, her nod to spring's renewal, and slipped on delicate gold earrings that twinkled like the stars she'd arrange across the cake. She styled her hair in loose waves, brushed on a soft rose lip tint, and checked herself in the full-length mirror. Yep, tonight would be perfect. By 4 p.m. she was on the phone with Harper Everly, her best friend since college at UT Austin. "Promise me you'll pace yourself," Harper teased. "You know I can't handle surprises." Zee laughed and reminded her that Harper's job at Ember Lounge was to keep her cool. "Your assigned role is emotional support," she said. With Harper's laugh still echoing in her ear, Zee straightened her shoulders and slid into her heels. She turned off her laptop, grabbed the envelope from her drawer, and tucked it into the back pocket of her wrap dress. Outside, the golden Texas sun cast long shadows over Barton Springs Road as she loaded the Our Little Star cake into the back seat of her car, placing it gently atop a soft blanket. At 5:30 p.m., she stopped by Wildflower and Parchment, her favorite florist, and picked out a bouquet of white ranunculus and baby's breath, fragile, hopeful blooms to match her own secret. The florist wrapped them in brown craft paper and tied them with a sage green ribbon. Zee inhaled their fresh scent and felt her chest tighten with happiness. Driving back, she rehearsed her lines in her head. "Addie, I have something amazing to tell you." But when she walked through the door of their shared loft, she didn't rush to the living room. Instead, she paused in the entryway, closed her eyes, and breathed in the familiar scent of bourbonwood panels and leather-bound books. Addie was already home. probably finishing up a report on ribosomal sequencing for Genexa Sciences. She draped the bouquet over the back of a chair and carried the cake box into the kitchen. Her hands shook as she spread out a handful of ivory taper candles on the counter. She lined them up by height. Then she set the wine in an ice bucket and arranged 2 crystal flutes on a nearby tray. Down the hallway, Zee heard the soft click of Addie's office door closing. Her pulse tripped ahead of her thoughts. She smoothed her dress one last time and picked up the envelope, the sealed ultrasound photos burning against her hip. Stepping into the living room, she flipped on the overhead dimmers. The space glowed with a warm, amber light. The cake, half decorated with its sleeping star motif, sat at the center of their coffee table, surrounded by flickering candles. The bouquet rested on the couch, its petals catching the light like a quiet promise. Addie peeked around the corner. His eyes widened when he saw her, so radiant in green, so softly triumphant. "Zee?" he asked, voice curious. She took a shaky breath, held out the envelope, and whispered, "I wanted this to be our night." His gaze flicked to the cake, to the wine, then back to her. And in that moment, before she could speak, the space between them pulsed with anticipation, the hush before revelation, and Zee knew she had created something he'd never forget. Just as the sun began its lazy descent over Austin's skyline, Zee felt a flutter of excitement, until an unexpected sight sent her pulse into overdrive. She'd planned to swing by Petal and Parchment on her way home, but as she rolled to a stop at the hotel entrance of the Almanac, her world tilted. Through the rain-washed glass doors, she saw him. Addie, Atlas Addie Hawthorne, his broad shoulders wrapped in a charcoal wool coat, his copper-brown hair tousled from the late afternoon wind. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Sloane Everly, her sapphire blue hair gleaming beneath the hotel's amber lanterns. Sloane's arm brushed Addie's as she leaned in, her laughter soft yet clear, carried on the hum of traffic and distant pedestrian chatter. Zee's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. She watched as Addie's lips curved into that familiar half-smile of his, the one that always made her heart skip, before drifting towards Sloane's ear in a way that felt too intimate for a simple whisper. Zee's breath caught. Was that a hand on Sloane's back, guiding her through the revolving door? Or just the way the light hit them? Her mind tugged at logic. Addie and Sloane were friends, both early collaborators on Nova Narrative's Spark campaign. But the hush around them, their shared sideways glances, the closeness of their bodies, it felt off. The world around her dimmed. Even the traffic signal pulses seemed to slow. For a moment, she considered driving away. Maybe she'd misread the scene. Maybe they were sharing a joke, only they understood. But when Sloane's fingers lingered on Addie's lapel, just a heartbeat longer than casual, Zee's heart sank with a weight the envelope in her back pocket could no longer bear. She blinked and looked away, willing the doubt to vanish. Yet as the door swung closed on their retreating forms, she saw the flash of Sloane's trademark grin, half shy, half conspiratorial, before Addie nodded and ushered her inside. It was a private world they'd stepped into, and Zee was locked out. In that instant, her perfectly choreographed evening threatened to unravel. She drew a shaky breath, forcing herself to stay bolstered by hope. Addie loved her, her mind, her ambition, every quirk she had. He'd been gentle and supportive since the day she joined Nova Narrative. Yet the sight of him with Sloane, someone Zee considered akin to a sister, ignited a wildfire of questions. Zee settled back into the driver's seat, her reflection wavering on the windshield. She pressed her palms to her temples, feeling a dull ache. Was she being paranoid? Was her mind playing tricks? Or was something real driving a wedge between her and the man she loved? She reached for her phone and tapped out a quick text to Sloane. "Hey, saw you and Addie at Almanac. Catch up tomorrow?" Her chest tightened as her message sent. Yes, she'd ask, she'd watch expressions, she'd get answers. Tonight wasn't just about baby news. It was about protecting everything she and Addie had built. She exhaled and focused on the next task, gathering her courage and the cake from the trunk. The Our Little Star box felt heavier now, loaded with both joy and unease. Zee closed her eyes, inhaling the faint scent of frosting mixed with engine oil. She reminded herself of the life growing inside her, an undeniable beacon of hope. This baby needed certainty, trust, and love. With a renewed sense of purpose, she flipped the trunk and eased the cake box onto her passenger seat. The fragile stars on its lid seemed to shimmer with empathy, as if urging her to hold onto faith. She picked up the bouquet of ranunculus and baby's breath at her feet, the white petals soft like a whisper of reassurance. As she merged back into traffic, every stoplight and honk seemed to echo her doubt. Yet she clung to resolve. Tonight, she would lay bare everything: the surprise, the ultrasound, and the secret joy. But first, she needed clarity. Tomorrow, at Lone Star Grounds, she would meet Sloane and ask the one question she dreaded: what really happened at the Almanac? Past the 16th Street Bridge, Zee steadied her grip on the steering wheel. The dusk sky burned peach and lavender, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine the evening unfolding perfectly. Addie's warmth at her side, their laughter mingling over cake, the tender way he'd cradle her hands as she revealed their baby. That vision, bright and fragile as a soap bubble, was worth fighting for. When she pulled into her garage, Zee took a moment to steady herself. She whispered to her reflection in the rearview mirror, "Tomorrow, answers. Tonight, we celebrate." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears of longing, fear, love, but also unwavering determination. She gathered the cake, the flowers, and the envelope containing their future. As she stepped into the quiet lobby of her apartment building, she lifted her chin. Doubt had flickered, but it would not burn her dreams. Tonight, the spark of new life would shine. And come morning, she would confront every shadow lingering at the edges of her perfect plan. Zee closed the door to her Capitol View loft behind her and leaned against it for a moment, exhaling in a slow hiss. The weight of what she'd just seen at the Almanac pressed against her chest. She balanced the cake box in one hand and the bouquet of ranunculus and baby's breath in the other, but inside her, everything felt unsteady. She'd rehearsed her entire evening around surprise and celebration, never confrontation. Yet as she set the cake on the marble kitchen island, her mind churned. Were they really just talking shop? Or was there something deeper brewing between Addie and Sloane? She canceled the overhead light and flicked on the small pendant lamp above the sink instead. Its glow was gentle, almost forgiving. But her own reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door showed wide, wary eyes. She brushed her fingers through her hair to calm the frizz of anxiety. "Tonight isn't the time," she whispered to herself. "You'll probe tomorrow." Her phone buzzed on the counter, an incoming Slack message from her Nova Narrative team lead, asking if she'd finalized the storyboard for next week's pitch. Zee sighed and tapped out a quick reply. "Almost there. We'll send by end of day." She tapped her temple, mind focused on appointment tomorrow. She opened the fridge and retrieved the chilled bottle of Pinot Gris. She set it beside the two crystal flutes on a silver tray and clicked open the cork. A faint pop echoed between the cabinets, a nervous habit she'd picked up from weekend wine tastings. She poured a thin ribbon of pale gold into each glass, setting one aside for Addie and, tentatively, one for herself. A soft ping alerted her to a text from Sloane. "Hey Zee, just wrapping up lab work. Free tonight if you need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" Smiling face with smiling eyes. Zee stared at the message. Tomorrow. She couldn't wait until after their meeting to comfort herself with cake and conversation. So she tapped back. "Tomorrow's good. Let's meet at Lone Star Grounds, 10 a.m.? She held her breath as the three little dots appeared, then vanished. Then Sloane replied, "See you then. Want a latte?" Zee typed, "Black, thanks." She exhaled, relief and trepidation mingling in her chest. Turning off the faucet, she glanced at the envelope tucked into her back dress pocket. Inside were the ultrasound photos, the irrefutable proof of her pregnancy. Nobody knew. Not yet. Not even Addie. It had felt selfish at first to hold on to that news, the swiftning of a new life. the glowing warmth in her veins. But now, with her trust rattled, she realized how vital it was to protect this secret until she had certainty. She placed the flowers in a slender glass vase on the island. The white petals contrasted with the cake's pale yellow icing, and for a second, she felt the old thrill. This was supposed to be joy. A joy interrupted, but still hers. She tucked stray curls behind her ear and slung her purse over one shoulder. Pulling open the door to her bedroom, she slipped off her green wrap dress and replaced it with dark-washed jeans and a soft, oatmeal-colored sweater, something comfortable yet pulled together enough for an early morning coffee date. She wanted to look calm and in control, not someone on the verge of tears. In the mirror, she studied her reflection, warm undertones, clear skin, eyes still bright. She dabbed a hint of rose-tinted balm on her lips and swept on a bit of mascara. No trace of the turmoil inside.
Good.
Her phone buzzed again, this time an email from Genexa Sciences confirming Sloane's late lab session. Zee closed her eyes and shook her head. Sloane was brilliant. That she'd asked Daddy for help made sense. But she wouldn't leave it to chance. She owed it to herself and to her child to find out the full story. She retrieved the envelope from the drawer beside her jewelry box and tucked it into her purse. Everything else she could endure, the confrontation, the possible denial, the sting of betrayal. But this envelope was her lifeline, her proof of hope. Zee drew in a steadying breath, slippery with equal parts fear and resolve. She reminded herself, tomorrow, she'll meet Sloane. Tomorrow,
She'll ask.
she deserves the truth.
10 Uhr morgens, Lone Star grounds.
The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped into Lone Star grounds. The familiar aroma of freshly ground beans and warm pastries wrapping around her like a soft blanket. She spotted Sloane at a corner table by the window, hunched over her laptop with one green neon streak of hair falling into her face. Sloane looked up and smiled, warm, open, unguarded.
Hey, Shay.
You okay? Zee slid into the seat opposite her and set her purse on the floor. For a moment, they simply regarded each other. Two friends who'd endured finals, first jobs, and long nights of brainstorming pitches. But today was different. Zee summoned a small, courteous smile. Morning, she said, voice low. Thanks for meeting me. No problem. Sloane closed her laptop with a soft click. You texted you sounded off. Everything all right at home. Zee took a sip of her black coffee, bitter and grounding. She didn't flinch. I saw you and Addie at the Almanac Hotel last night. Sloane's brow rose, surprise flickering in her eyes. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't warn you. I snagged him to review my genome sequencing data for the next T-Dynamic pitch. He stayed late at the lab. Zee leaned forward, lacing her fingers together. He didn't invite me, she said quietly. He stepped behind that pillar and I only caught what looked like, well, it looked intimate. Sloane's expression softened. Zee, I get why you'd worry. Especially after everything. But I swear, that night was strictly work. You know Addie. He's professional to a fault. If he'd been doing anything else, I'd have known. Zee swallowed past the lump in her throat. I know he's professional. And I want to believe you. But I need to know. She paused, seeing Sloane's face in the soft morning light. Honest, open, a little pained. What can I do to prove it? Sloane asked, voice gentle. Zee's gaze flicked to her coffee. She wanted to trust her, but doubt still gnawed. She picked up her phone and found the ultrasound envelope icon in her mind, shining with truth. But she wasn't ready to share that just yet. I need to hear from him, she said after a beat. I need him to look me in the eye and tell me it was work. Sloane nodded. Then let's go talk to him together.
Now. Jay's pulse quickened.
The confrontation loomed large, but she felt bolstered by Sloane's standing by her side. She closed her eyes, drew in a shaky breath, and nodded back. Okay, she said. Let's go. They rose, coffees abandoned on the table, and walked out into the bright, Austin morning. Sloane slipped her arm into Zee's for support, and for the first time since the hotel sighting, Zee felt a flicker of hope. No matter what awaited at the almanac, she would face it head-on, armed with questions, with friendship, and with the secret beating life in her drawer. And with that, she stepped toward the truth she deserved. Zee Monroe sat in her car, engine idling softly, a block away from the Almanac Hotel. The late-morning light glinted off the polished chrome of her sedan, but inside, everything felt muted and heavy. She clutched her latte, black, just like she'd asked, let its warmth seep into her palm and steady her racing heart. Across Barton Springs Road, the pigeon-gray facade of the hotel loomed, its revolving doors reflecting the afternoon traffic. She'd scoped this spot the night before, noting the exact angle where the hotel's canopy blocked the afternoon sun. Perfect for spying without being seen. Now, with an unsteady breath, she watched as people drifted in and out. Business travelers with roller bags, tourists clutching guidebooks, a valet kneeling to secure a sedan's wheel lock. Zee's eyes flicked to her passenger seat, where she'd placed a small notebook and pen. Below them, tucked under her purse, lay the unopened envelope with her ultrasound photos, her private proof of hope.
Tonight.
This envelope would be the center of celebration. But first, she needed answers. She glanced at her phone. No messages from Sloane yet, but Sloane had promised to meet if things got weird. Zee closed her eyes and inhaled the faint scent of coffee and upholstery. She reminded herself, "You've got this. Just watch, just wait, then ask." A soft ping broke the quiet. Zee opened her phone to find a text from Sloane. "On my way. Taking an Uber, should be there in 10. Relief rippled through her. She'd go in with Sloane by her side. Nothing reviled confrontation like solidarity. She sipped her latte and set the cup in the cup holder, glancing at the hotel entrance. Through the glass, she spotted Addy emerging from a side door, his lab coat flapping around his legs, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. Behind him, Sloane stepped out of an Uber, her expression bright when she spotted Zee. Zee put the car in drive and pulled up to the valet stand. Before anyone could approach her window, she rolled it down. "I'm just here to wait for a friend," she called over her shoulder. The valet nodded, uninterested. She parked by a curb, cut the engine, and let out the breath she'd been holding. Sloane slid into the passenger seat, closing the door softly. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey," Zee murmured back. Then, louder, "Ready?" Sloane gave her a small, steady nod. They climbed out, side by side, and strolled toward the revolving doors under the canopy. Inside the marble foyer, the lobby was hushed except for the tick of a polished grandfather clock. A bell above the revolving doors jingled as Zee and Sloane passed the concierge desk. Zee paused. The concierge, a bespectacled man in a navy suit, glanced up and offered a courteous nod. Zee offered a polite smile in return. No alarms, no whispers. They rounded a corner to find Addy pausing beside the elevators, tapping at his phone. Zee's pulse thundered. She saw his profile, strong jawline, thoughtful brow furrowed in concentration. Sloane touched her arm. "Let's do this." They approached. Addy looked up, surprise flickering across his face.
Shay.
"Sloane? What are you?" Zee caught her breath. The words unspooled in her mind. "I saw you two last night. I need the truth." But she forced calm into her voice. "Hey, Addy.
Can we talk?"
He blinked, clutching his laptop bag like a lifeline. "Sure, just a sec." He tapped his elevator call. Zee and Sloane followed. As the doors slid shut around them, Zee's hands trembled. She held her notebook in one hand, the ever-present envelope in her pocket. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, they stepped out into a carpeted corridor lit by soft sconces. Room 412 was 3 doors down. Zee led the way, her footsteps echoing. Sloane matched her pace. Addy lingered, watchful. Outside 412, Zee paused, staring at the brass number. Familiar dread churned in her stomach. She pressed a hand to the doorframe. Addy cleared his throat. "Zee, can we talk somewhere else?" Her jaw clenched. "No," she said, voice low but firm. "I need to know what happened in here." He exchanged a glance with Sloane. Zee's heart tightened. Sloane gave her an encouraging nod. Zee raised her hand and gave the door a single, firm knock. Knock, knock. No answer. Another knock. Thud, thud. Addie shifted. Zee, please. She cut him off. I saw you bring Sloane in this room last night. I want to know why. Silence. The hum of the hotel's air conditioning filled the pause. Zee let the stillness stretch, daring him to respond. Finally, the door clicked. It was pulled open by a housekeeper mid-20s, apron crisp and linen white, eyes widening at the trio.
Oh.
I'm sorry, she stammered. I thought you were the guests. Zee's chest ached. The door swung wider, revealing the empty room. A king bed perfectly made, a small writing desk, and a laptop perched on a side table. No sign of secrets. The housekeeper stepped back. Room's ready. Housekeeping will be in soon. Zee didn't move. Thank you. The door clicked shut behind the housekeeper. Addie exhaled. Zee, you've got it wrong. Last night, Sloane and I went over her genome analysis. We were here until... What? Zee interrupted. Until what? Whose hotel is it? Addie's face crumpled in frustration. Our clients. It's a private session we booked to work in peace. Sloane nodded.
Right.
I couldn't get past the lab's noise, Addie offered, and I accepted. That's it. Zee's eyes burned. She wanted to lash out, demanded proof. But instead, she clenched her fists, recalling the hush, the laughter she thought she saw. Why didn't you invite me? Addie's shoulders sagged. Zee, it wasn't your field. I thought you'd be bored. Because it's not my field, she whispered, hurt and heat mingling. You kept me out. Sloane reached out.
Shay, I swear.
Zee held up a hand. I need time. She stepped back, words brittle. I'm done here. Addie reached for her arm.
Shay.
She shrugged free and turned away, her heels clicking down the hallway. Sloane followed, concern in her stride. Addie stood behind them, helpless as doors closed on the confrontation. In the elevator back to the lobby, Zee pressed herself against the wall, closing her eyes. The envelope in her pocket pulsed with quiet significance. She exhaled, steadying herself. Tonight, she would still celebrate. But trust would have to wait until Addie proved he deserved it. When the elevator doors opened, Zee and Sloane stepped into the bright foyer. Sloane slipped an arm through Zee's. I'm sorry, she said softly.
Shay nodded.
Thanks for being here. Together, they walked toward the exit. Outside, the Texas sun bounced off the pavement. Zee lifted her chin. The ambush had yielded answers, partial and painful, but also clarity. Tonight, she'd still light candles and reveal her secret. Tomorrow, she'd confront Addie again, armed with truth and guarded by the life she carried. And with that resolve, Zee stepped into the glare of daylight, her next move already taking shape. Zee's heart thundered as she and Sloane stepped back into the hushed corridor of the 4th floor. The polished elevator doors had clicked shut behind them, and now the only sound was the soft carpet under her heels and the distant hum of the hotel's ventilation. Room 412 stood just a few paces ahead. Its brass-plated number gleamed under the sconce light. She paused, took a trembling breath, and reached for the doorknob. Behind it lay the scene that had haunted her all night. Her pulse spiked as she turned the knob and nudged the door open. The room was dimly lit by a slender desk lamp perched on a low table, its cone of yellow light illuminating 2 swivel chairs and a sleek conference table. A pair of tall windows framed the view of Austin's cityscape, the late afternoon sun slicing through the gap in the blackout curtains and casting stark shadows across the plush carpet. Zee's breath caught. For a heartbeat, she feared she'd walk in on something illicit, her worst nightmare realized. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw instead 2 laptops propped open, their screens alive with lines of code and genomic data graphs. On the table lay lab notebooks scribbled with formulas and annotated diagrams, a half-empty pitcher of ice water, and 2 glasses. A thin stack of scientific journals sat neatly in one corner, as though waiting for their authors to return. Sloane slipped past Zee and leaned forward, peering at the screen of the laptop on the left. "See," she whispered. Addie was running the sequence analysis. Zee folded her arms, the weight of the cake box and bouquet forgotten at the hallway door. She stepped fully into the room, her eyes flicking from the notebooks to the glowing monitors. The screens displayed swirling chromatograms and alignment charts, very technical, very specialized, painfully legitimate. Footsteps sounded behind them. Addie's shadow appeared at the doorway. Hesitation etched into his posture. He was still wearing his charcoal coat, but the lab coat she remembered from that morning lay crumpled on the back of one of the chairs. His laptop bag leaned against the far wall, forgotten in the haste of their arrival. Zee's throat tightened. "Addie," she said, voice low and trembling. "What the hell is going on?" His eyes widened as he realized both women were inside. He stepped forward, arms raised as if to explain. "She. She cut him off with a hard laugh that echoed in the small space. "You brought Sloane here to what? Whisper sweet nothings. Plot to steal my spark." Addie shut his mouth and glanced at Sloane, whose expression was a mixture of guilt and earnestness. He turned back to Zee. "I didn't lead you on," he said quietly. "I swear. This is all work. Work I thought you didn't care about." Zee crossed her arms. "So, you think I'd be bored in a science lab?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Is that it?" Addie ran a hand through his hair, his breath quick.
No.
"I thought you'd be more comfortable at home. I wanted this to be our night." His gaze flicked to the desk lamp, to the notebooks. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin your surprise."
Surprise.
Zee's chest tightened at the word. The cake, the candles, the envelope full of ultrasound photos. Every plan she'd made felt drowning under his apologies. She rounded on Sloane. "And you," she said, voice sharp. "You knew." Sloane's shoulders slumped.
I'm sorry.
"He stayed late after I asked for his help. I shouldn't have asked him to come here. I thought it would be quiet, no distractions." Zee's gaze darted between them. They were both here, standing in the middle of this rented suite, expecting her to believe their story. She could almost see the sincerity in their eyes, but she felt hollowed by doubt. She swallowed, fighting tears of frustration. "Show me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Show me one real thing that proves you're not lying." Addie hesitated, then walked to the desk and lifted a lab notebook. He flipped it open to a page covered in neat blue ink handwriting, sample IDs, alignment scores, annotation comments. "Here," he said, voice steady despite the tension. "Look at the timestamp. Last night at 11:17 p.m., I ran this analysis. It took an hour. Then I cross-checked it with Sloane's data." He handed the notebook to Zee. She held it unsteadily and leaned in to read. Words like Illumina Novaseek, reads per million, variant calling, all terms she barely understood, but which spelled out sheer hours of meticulous work. She glanced at the laptop screens again. One showed a spinning progress wheel on a massive dataset. The other displayed a 3D protein folding model. This was specialized, detailed research. This was not the tender, private moment she'd feared. A knot of guilt clenched her stomach. She looked up at Addie, her eyes brimming. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked. "I'm not some fragile thing who can't handle a little genomics." Addie took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid I'd ruin everything. Tonight was supposed to be about us, about celebrating our baby. I didn't think you'd. I thought I was protecting you." Zee closed the notebook and handed it back. Her shoulders sagged with relief and exhaustion. She pressed a hand to the small of her back and let out a shaky breath. "You did protect me," she said softly. "But trust isn't built on secrets." Addie's chest rose with his breath. "I know." Sloane, still standing by the desk, swallowed hard.
Zee
turned to her friend, her eyes softening. "I know you meant well, Sloane. But next time, please be honest." Sloane nodded, tears gathering at her eyes. "I'm so sorry." An awkward silence filled the room, punctuated only by the hum of the air conditioning and the ticking clock on the desk. Zee looked around at the notebooks, the laptops, the half-empty water glasses. The evidence of their sincerity was everywhere. She tipped her head back and let a single tear escape down her cheek. Addie reached out and brushed it away with his thumb. She let him, closing her eyes as his warm hand cupped her face. "I love you," he whispered. She opened her eyes and nodded. "I know," she answered. "And I love you, too." He hesitated, then asked softly, "Will you still tonight? I mean, celebrate?" Zee took a breath and let the tension slip from her shoulders. She reached into the front pocket of her purse and pulled out the small white envelope. She held it out to him, allowing the lamplight to catch the raised gold script bearing her name. "I want you to open it," she said. Addie accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Sloane stepped back to give them space, lingering by the window where the sun had dipped lower into the Texas skyline. Zee turned her gaze to the sunset, streaks of tangerine and lavender painting the sky. It felt like the world was giving them a second chance in that golden light. She turned back to Addie. He slit the envelope open and withdrew the ultrasound photos. His eyes widened as he saw the tiny, flickering form of their child. He looked at Zee, stunned, vulnerability shining in his gaze. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he pressed the photos to his heart. "We have a baby," he breathed. Zee moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. The glow from the desk lamp wrapped around them, and for a moment, the world outside that small hotel room didn't exist. They stood together, breathing in the promise of new life, the fragility of trust restored by truth. In the quiet aftermath of confrontation, amid charts and graphs and whispered apologies, they rediscovered each other and the life they would share. Outside, the Texas night was settling in, and the city lights blinked on like distant stars. Inside room 412, a family story was just beginning. The moment Zee's keys clicked in the lock, she felt every muscle in her body tremble. The hallway light flickered as she stepped into the loft's entryway, still wrapped in the electric tension of what she'd just done. Her heart hammered like a drumroll gone rogue, her palms slick with sweat. She closed the door behind her, leaned her forehead against its cool surface, and let out a long, shuddering breath, one that tasted equal parts rage and resolve. She'd driven straight from Summit House Hotel in downtown Austin, adrenaline fueling every mile. In her pocket, a crumpled notepad bore the words she never imagined writing. "Sale of husband, $500,000. The phrase echoed in her mind, grotesque and perfect.
Tonight.
Addie and Sloane had watched her tear that spreadsheet in half as proof that she meant business, proof that betrayal had consequences, and she would no longer be a silent victim. Zee's fingertips itched, nearly burning through the layers of fabric as she withdrew her phone and replayed the last snippet of that confrontation.
Jay, coldly.
"I'm done bargaining for crumbs of trust. 50 with a zero, $500,000. You want him, you pay me. You both can take him, but not until you cover what you owe for breaking me." She had watched Sloane's mouth fall open, heard Addie's desperate, fractured apology, then turned without waiting for their pleas. The memory made her stomach twist into knots. She set the phone aside and crossed the open-concept living room, where the Our Little Star cake and half-lit candles still waited on the coffee table, mocking her. The loft felt cavernous now, overwhelmingly empty. She toggled every lamp off until the only light came from the city's skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Anchored by that soft glow, she sank onto the leather sofa, the envelope with the ultrasound printouts heavy in her lap. She let her fingers trace the gold embossed lettering, Zee Monroe, on the envelope seal. For a moment, she closed her eyes and inhaled. Seeking the small comfort of this singular truth, she carried new life. A quiet click behind her snapped her back. Addie stood in the kitchen doorway, his coat still on, and Sloane hovered by the hallway entrance. Their faces, pale, drawn, eyes rimmed red, seemed to float in the darkness. Addie's voice cracked as he took a tentative step forward. "Zee, please." She didn't move. Instead, She pressed her palm against the envelope, her nails indenting its paper shell. "I've made my terms clear," she said evenly. "Your money or your silence." Her words hung in the night air, harsh as broken glass. Addie's eyes glistened. "I don't have $500,000, Zee. Please, you know I'd give you everything I have if I could. But that's not possible." A hard laugh escaped her lips, brittle with disbelief. "Not possible? You gave me an excuse, lab notebooks, genome mapping, instead of a truth. You lied to my face. To my home." She gestured around the dim living room. "I trusted you. I envisioned us, celebrating our baby, starting a family. You both violated that." Sloane's robes rustled as she stepped forward, voice trembling.
Shay, I swear.
Not another word. Zee's hand rose in dismissal. "You both played me for a fool. Now you'll pay the price." Sloane's shoulders slumped. She swallowed visibly. "I don't know what to say." Zee's eyes narrowed. "Then say nothing. Just do something." She stood, sank to one knee to meet Sloane's gaze. "Look me in the eye and tell me you'll pay up. Or walk away and leave me in peace." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the AC. Then Addie crossed to Sloane's side and gently touched her arm. "Give her a chance," he pleaded. "I'll find a way." Zee rose, towering over them. "You had your chance." With deliberate slowness, she reached into her robe pocket and withdrew the other half of the spreadsheet, now stained with the imprint of her palm and a single tear. She held it out to Sloane. "Keep it as a reminder of what you owe me. My dignity, my trust, my future." Sloane's hand trembled as she accepted the paper. She glanced at Addie, who blinked back tears, before looking down at Zee. "I understand." That word, understand, struck Zee like a physical blow. She swallowed back the tears that threatened to betray her steely facade. "Good," she said softly. "Now get out." They lingered, heads bowed, before turning to leave. Zee heard the door click shut behind them, and for a moment, she stood alone in the hush that followed. She sank onto the sofa again, tracing the edge of the envelope. Her body shook with the aftershocks of anger and grief. She couldn't tell how much time passed, only that the silence was both a salve and a wound. She took the envelope in both hands and carefully peeled back the flap. Inside lay the two ultrasound images, the tiny crescent flicker of a future she still believed in. Her tears fell freely now, hot and unrestrained. She pressed the photos to her lips, as though kissing a lifeline. "I'm so sorry you had to see this," she whispered, "but no one else will." Somewhere outside, a car horn blared. The city, oblivious, carried on. For Zee, the world had fractured into then and now, before the sale and after. After a minute that felt like an hour, she rose and gathered the cake plate from the coffee table. The buttercream stars had melted slightly in the warmth of her home. She wiped her tears on her sleeve and carried the plate into the kitchen. With a surgeon's precision, she sliced a single serving and placed it on a small dessert plate. She poured herself another glass of Pinot Gris, the pale gold liquid catching the city lights. She carried the plate and glass back to the living room. Settling on the sofa, she set the plate on her knee. The cake tasted bittersweet, sweet vanilla, tang of lemon zest in the frosting, but beneath, an undertone of salt. She realized she had never tasted anything so complex. The door to her bedroom opened, and her cat, Nimbus, padded in, white fur gleaming in the low light. He hopped onto the sofa armrest, tail swishing. Zee offered him a corner of cake. Nimbus sniffed, then turned his head in a slow nod of feline approval. Zee smiled for the first time in hours. She whispered, "We'll be okay, Nimbus." He blinked up at her, unbothered by human drama. After a few bites, she pushed the plate aside, drained the wine, and rose. In the kitchen, she rinsed the glass, set it on the drying rack, and turned off the faucet. She paused and placed her hand against the cool tile backsplash, drawing strength from its solidity. With one final glance at the fridge's photo collage, snapshots of her and Addie in happier times, she opened the freezer door, extracted the bowl of leftover frosting, and scraped it into her mouth. The childhood comfort a balm for her battered heart. At last, she cleaned the dishes, dried her hands, and locked eyes with her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. She saw a woman transformed, raw with pain, yes, but unbroken, resolute. She straightened her shoulders and slowly unwrapped her robe, hanging it beside the door where it caught the city's faint glow. She tucked the ultrasound envelope into a drawer, under her journals, where it would be safe. Then she made her way to bed, slipping beneath the navy blue sheets, drawing the covers up to her chin. Nimbus leapt onto the mattress and settled at her feet. Zee stared at the ceiling. The city hummed beyond the window. Her phone buzzed with a single unread message from Addie. "I'm sorry. I love you." She left it unopened. In the quiet dark, she placed a hand on her abdomen, where her future pulsed softly, imperceptible and perfect. She inhaled deeply and whispered, "Good night, my baby. We'll build a world worth living in." Tomorrow, she would call her lawyer. She would find a new loft, secure her finances, and, most importantly, protect her child. Tonight, though, she found solace in her solitude, in the flicker of a secret heartbeat, and in the knowledge that some prices were too high to pay, while others were worth every cent. And as she drifted toward sleep, the city lights dimmed against the rising moon, Zee Monroe knew she had claimed her worth. For herself, for her baby, and, in that reclamation, she discovered a power that no betrayal could ever steal. Zephyr, Zee Monroe woke to pale morning light filtering through the sheer curtains of her loft. Nimbus, her white cat, padded onto the bed and curled against her hip, purring softly. For the first time in weeks, Zee didn't feel the tight knot of dread in her chest, only a resolute calm. Today she would file for divorce, closing one chapter and opening another for herself and the life growing inside her. She dressed in a tailored navy blazer and dark-washed jeans, professional yet approachable. In the kitchen, she brewed a pot of Earl Grey tea and arranged her documents on the marble island, the divorce petition, financial affidavits, and parenting plan draft. Each paper bore the emboss of Travis County Family Court. She sipped her tea, tasting determination in its bitter warmth, and gently scratched Nimbus behind the ears before gathering her items into a sleek black portfolio. At the courthouse, the limestone facade and grand pillars felt less daunting than the emotional toll the process steeled her for. Inside, she stood in line at the family law counter, clutching her portfolio like armor. When her turn came, the clerk stamped her petition with a bright red, "Filed," and handed her a copy along with a case number, D1FM 24-25689. Relief washed over Zee as she tucked the packet away. No contested grounds, no bitter arguments, irreconcilable differences, as straightforward as needed. By mid-morning she met with her attorney, Christina Nguyen, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Austin. Together they reviewed temporary orders, shared medical expense coverage for her pregnancy, a phased division of marital assets, and clear guidelines for dividing their joint savings. Zee insisted on maintaining sole ownership of her half of the loft and her pre-marriage retirement account, while Addie would retain his lab investments. She waived spousal support in exchange for expedited final judgment. Christina commended her clarity. "You're setting the terms on your own behalf,"
she said.
"That's powerful." Leaving the law firm, Zee felt the center of gravity shift within her. She stopped at a local stationery shop and bought pastel file folders labeled legal, medical, and personal. Back home, she sorted paperwork neatly, each folder a category of her new life. She placed her divorce decree copy and temporary order drafts in legal, her prenatal records in medical, and her journals and keepsakes in personal. The simple act of organization steadied her. In the afternoon sun, she moved on to packing. She retrieved sturdy cardboard boxes from storage and began with Addie's belongings, his suits, shirts, and shoes, labeling the box Addie's, to be collected. She resolved to have his lawyer arrange pickup. Next, she boxed up shared items, kitchen tools, bookshelves, and framed photos for mediation. Finally, she packed her own essentials, notebooks, design portfolios, and a single coffee mug that read Creator. Each item represented her identity apart from marriage. By early evening, the spare bedroom awaited transformation. Zee cleared the clutter and assembled the white crib she'd purchased weeks ago. She hung a delicate mobile of origami cranes above it and arranged pastel onesies in the changing table drawers. Nimbus inspected every corner, tail twitching in approval. Zee imagined late-night feedings, lullabies, and the soft weight of her daughter in her arms, a vision that ignited hope stronger than any fear. Her phone buzzed with a call from Addie. She hesitated, then answered. He stood in his new apartment, voice hollow. He apologized, acknowledged the spreadsheet ultimatum, and offered to negotiate a fair settlement.
Zee listened quietly.
Grateful for his contrition but resolute. I filed today, she said. Now I need space. She ended the call gently. That night, Zee prepared a simple dinner of pan-seared salmon and roasted Brussels sprouts, pouring herself a glass of Chablis. She set a second place with a small sippy cup and a plush giraffe toy as a silent welcome to her unborn child. She ate slowly, each bite grounding her in resilience. Nimbus perched on the counter, hopeful for scraps. Zee shared a piece of salmon with him and whispered, "We're okay." After dinner, she logged into Nova Narrative's HR portal and confirmed her transfer to the San Diego office as creative director, a role she had earned months ago. The new position promised fresh challenges and a supportive community. She booked a flight for the following week and updated her lease termination date. Every administrative step became a tangible marker of her fresh start. Before bed, Zee withdrew the ultrasound envelope from her nightstand drawer. She smoothed the gold embossed flap, then laid the images on her pillow where she could see them from under the covers. She whispered to her unborn daughter, "Mommy's making it right," snuggling beneath the navy blue sheets. Zee closed her eyes to the hum of the city below and Nimbus's gentle purr at her feet. In that peaceful darkness, she felt gratitude for her courage, for the support of her attorney and friends, and for the unwavering promise of new life. Tomorrow she would sign the final decree. Tomorrow she would step onto a plane bound for a new coast. But tonight, she rested on the certainty that divorce had not broken her. It had set her free to become the mother and woman she was always meant to be. Atlas, Addie, Hawthorne stared at the pale gray walls of his new one-bedroom apartment. The silence, so complete it felt like a physical weight bearing down on him. Just hours earlier, he had fled the loft he once shared with Zee, his heart shattered by her ultimatum and final rejection. Now, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the stale scent of paint, he was alone, no music, no laughter, only the echo of his own regret. He sank onto the edge of the mattress, his shoulders slumping as exhaustion claimed him. Last night's confrontation replayed in his mind on an endless loop, Zee's firm, icy voice announcing that she was selling him for $500,000, her eyes wide with betrayal. His own pleading, wordless as the door slammed shut on him. He pressed his palms to his face, fingertips trembling, and let out a long, shuddering breath. Addie's gaze fell to the pile of moving boxes lined against the opposite wall. He had only brought the bare essentials, a duffel bag with a couple of changes of clothes, his laptop bag, and a stack of notebooks he used for his genome research at Genexa Sciences. Everything else, photographs, mementos, the comfort of a home built on shared dreams, had been left behind at the loft. He realized, in that crushing moment, that the loft had been more than bricks and mortar. It had been a refuge, a place where he and Zee had planned their future, where she'd surprised him with tickets to conferences and silly t-shirts that said "Future Dad." He felt sick. Reaching into his jacket pocket, Addie pulled out his phone and opened his text app. He stared at the blank screen, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. A message blinking at the top read, "I'll pay, Zee, I swear." He had typed it hours ago in a panic, but had never sent it. What could he say that wouldn't sound hollow after all the lies, all the hidden truths? He deleted the draft and shut the phone off. No quick fix could erase the damage. In the dim light of dawn, Addie finally rose from the bed. He squared his shoulders and walked to the living room, where he noticed the scattered remnants of takeout containers, pizza boxes, sushi trays, left over from the night he moved in. He rummaged through the boxes, found a nearly empty bottle of water, and took a small sip. His reflection in the dark window stared back at him. Red-rimmed eyes and unshaven jaw. He looked defeated. Then, tucked between two notebooks on the floor, he spotted the sealed envelope Zee had given him the night she'd asked him to open it. Heart pounding, he picked it up and turned it over, his name embossed in flowing gold script, Zee Monroe. He felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it held her forgiveness, or an explanation. His hands shook as he eased open the flap. Inside lay the ultrasound photos, two small printouts of their unborn child, dark shapes illuminated by the flicker of a tiny heartbeat. Addie's chest constricted at the sight. He pressed the photos to his forehead and closed his eyes, willing himself to believe that all was not lost, that the life growing inside her could still bind them together. He knelt on the floor, placing the photos beside him. He pressed his palm to the beige carpet and bowed his head. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into the emptiness. "I never meant to hurt you." He spoke to the photos, to the life they represented, promising to protect his daughter's future no matter the cost to himself. Tears slipped from his eyes as he voiced his vows, as though confession alone could begin the healing. After a long moment, Addie rose and paced the length of the apartment. He knew what he had to do. Find Zee, explain the truth, and beg her forgiveness. No matter how impossible it seemed, he would chase her to the ends of the earth. He gathered the notebooks from his work bag, pages upon pages of genomic charts, research notes, and meeting agendas, reminders of the late-night session he'd shared with Sloan. He stuffed them into a box and taped it shut, then wrote to return on the top. He did not deserve them. By mid-morning, Addie had packed everything into his duffel: clothes, shoes, toiletries, the ultrasound photos, and a folded letter he'd written after the fallout. In it, he poured out every regret. The fear that drove him to hide his late-night work from Zee, the assumption that she wouldn't understand the importance of Sloan's genome analysis, and the painful realization that in shielding her from boredom, he'd betrayed her trust. He wrote of his love for her and for their child, of his willingness to do whatever it took to make things right. He sealed the letter, slipped it into a slim manila envelope, and taped it to the ultrasound prints. He hesitated only briefly before taking the elevator down from the 5th floor of his complex and boarding an Uber to the airport. His palms were sweaty on the door handle as he gave the address. He felt disoriented by the city's hum of midday traffic, horns blaring, engines idling, yet resolute. Each passing block confirmed his determination. He would not let fear or pride prevent him from fighting for his family. At Austin Bergstrom International Airport, Addie moved through the terminal with purpose. He booked the earliest flight to San Diego, Zee's destination. He had discovered in her packed belongings at the loft. He slid onto the rickety airport stool and watched the departures board. 3:45 p.m. to Assen, Gate 12. His stomach churned with a mixture of dread and anticipation. He paid for his ticket without hesitation, grateful for the opportunity to chase her. As boarding time neared, he stood in the bustling queue, the crowds around him an ocean of strangers. He closed his eyes and took deep breaths, repeating silently, "I love you. I will make this right." When the agent scanned his boarding pass, he nodded in thanks and stepped onto the jet bridge. The plane's interior was cool and antiseptic, the hum of the engines a lullaby of motion. He settled into seat 14C, clipped in, and stared out the window as the Texas plains passed below. He thought of Zee, her laughter at sunrise yoga, the way she'd rest her head on his shoulder when she was tired, the gentle glow in her eyes when she'd whispered her secret that night. He thought of his daughter, already her mother's mirror, and how he'd failed them both. But now, soaring above the clouds, he vowed to banish regret with action. He would cross the country for one chance at redemption. Landing in San Diego, Addie hurried off the plane, adrenaline surging through his veins. He navigated the crowded concourse, following the signs to the taxi stand. The driver dropped him at the address he'd memorized. A light-filled loft in the Little Italy district. He barely noticed the city's charm, cobblestone sidewalks, artisan cafes, his heart focused on one goal, finding Zee. He climbed the few steps to her building's entryway. The door was unlocked, as if she'd left it that way for him. He pressed the buzzer to her unit, his breath catching when he heard the faint click of the door lock disengaging. He stepped into the lobby, each footstep heavy with anticipation.
Zee's door stood open.
And there she stood, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the living room lamps. She held her suitcase in one hand, a duffel in the other, her expression a mix of astonishment and guarded caution. Addie's legs trembled as he approached, hand outstretched, but he stopped a foot away, unsure if she would even let him in. "Zee," he began, voice low and raw. She looked at him, eyes wide, tears shimmering. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope and photos. "I know I have no right," he said, "but I had to come. I needed to show you the truth." He held out the ultrasound photos. She glanced down, mouth parting, before meeting his gaze. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never should have hidden anything from you. I never saw your sacrifice, your exhaustion. I took you for granted. But I love you, both of you. Please let me prove it." Zee's breath caught, and Addie felt hope flicker. He unfolded the letter and offered it to her. "Please read it," he pleaded. "Then decide if you can ever forgive me." Hesitation wavered in her eyes. Then she took the letter as Addie stepped back respectfully. She unfolded the pages and began to read, her eyes scanning the words he had written in anguished sincerity. He watched her face soften, tears rolling down her cheeks as she read confession after confession. In her expression, he glimpsed the tender flicker of the trust he had shattered. When she looked up, Addie saw something he'd almost thought lost, the faint glimmer of hope. She pressed the ultrasound photo to her heart, then took his hand. I need time," she whispered. Addie nodded, relief flooding him. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." That night, they sat together on the edge of the crib he had come to assemble. An imbus curled at their feet. Addie wrapped his arms around Zee, promising to rebuild their home and their trust, brick by patient brick. And for the first time since betrayal had torn them apart, he believed in the possibility of redemption. In the soft glow of the nursery's nightlight, Addie laid his head against Zee's shoulder and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would call his transfer off and find local work. Tomorrow he would help her with every prenatal appointment, every nursery detail. Tomorrow, he vowed, he would prove that his remorse was not too late, and that love, when spoken in truth and sustained by action, could still forge a future worth fighting for. 20 years had sculpted Zee Monroe into a woman of quiet strength and grace. She stood in the courtyard of her alma mater, the centennial arch of Avery Hall rising behind her like a sentinel of memory. The campus, now bustling with students hurrying between classes, felt both familiar and distant, much like her own heart. Clad in a tailored navy blazer and a silk scarf the color of dawn, Zee inhaled the crisp spring air. She'd returned to speak at the media alumni panel, representing Nova Narrative's San Diego headquarters. Her daughter, Isabel, Izzy, accompanied her, now a bright-eyed first-year aspiring filmmaker. Together they walked the quad, stepping over scattered cherry blossoms. As they passed the fountain where Zee and Addie had once shared late-night study sessions, Izzy paused to toss a penny into the water. "Make a wish, Mom?" she asked, voice hopeful. Zee followed suit, closing her eyes to wish for the same. Peace. A gentle clap on her shoulder drew her gaze. She turned to see Sloane Everly, her once best friend and fellow panelist. Time had softened Sloane's sapphire hair to silver-blue strands, but her eyes retained their spark of fierce loyalty. They embraced, careful yet genuine. "Sloane," Zee whispered, "it's been too long." Sloane nodded, tears glinting. 20 years, I still remember that ultimatum. She offered a rueful smile. Never thought I'd live that down.
Zee squeezed her hand.
Nor did I. But look at us now, still standing. They joined the panel tent, where a small crowd of alumni chattered. Zee took her seat beside Sloane and the moderator, scanning the audience until her gaze landed on a familiar figure at the rear, Addie Hawthorne. He'd attended too, representing Gen X's West Coast division. He looked older, salt and pepper hair, glasses perched on his nose, but the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. When the moderator introduced the session, Zee spoke first, sharing her journey of betrayal, single motherhood, and career resurgence. She described how motherhood had honed her resilience and creativity, fueling Nova Narrative's award-winning Second Chance campaign. The audience listened, rapt. Midway through, she paused and glanced at Addie, who offered a respectful nod. When her segment ended, applause rippled through the tent. Zee invited Sloane and Addie to join her on stage. Heart-thudding, she said, "Today isn't just about second chances in business. It's about the grace of forgiveness." The panelists smiled as Sloane added, "Forgiving others set me free. I learned that loyalty means honesty, even when it hurts." Finally, Addie rose. He cleared his throat, voice steady. 20 years ago, I broke the trust of two of the most important people in my life. I let fear and pride guide me, and I hurt Zee and Sloane deeply. I've spent every day since working to earn back that trust." He gestured to his chest. He held up a framed photo of Izzy at her preschool graduation, the pride in Zee's smile identical to Sloane's, captured in a separate frame. "This is gratitude for the forgiveness they granted me, for the family we rebuilt together." The crowd erupted in applause. Tears welled in Zee's eyes as she rose. Addie stepped forward and took her hand. Sloane hugged both of them. For a moment, the years of pain and distance melted away. Afterward, they posed for photos and shared coffee under the blooming jacaranda trees. Izzy laughed as her parents recounted old campus pranks. Sloane teased Addie about his lab coat collection, and Addie gently ribbed Zee about her perfectionism. The air between them was light, threaded with affection that time had strengthened rather than eroded. As the afternoon sun dipped, Zee led them to the site of their old study spot, the fountain. She dipped her hand into the cool water and asked Addie to join her. He did, and together they tossed coins, making silent wishes for continued friendship, family, and the promise that no mistake would ever go unforgiven again. In that courtyard, surrounded by laughter and blossoming trees, Zee realized that redemption wasn't a destination, but a lifelong journey. And as they walked back toward Avery Hall, linked arm in arm, she felt the full, abiding warmth of a heart finally at peace. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistery Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.